Let me start by saying this. I never wanted to be here. Not at my sister's wedding. Not in this ridiculous suit that makes me feel like a penguin who got lost on his way to Antarctica. And certainly not standing in the middle of Connecticut's most overpriced banquet hall while my dad glares at me like I just kicked his dog. But here I am, Elliot Carter, your reluctant narrator for today's chaos. A story you'll either love or hate, but will definitely want to hear until the very end. So, if you're reading this or listening, depending on how we roll, hit subscribe because trust me, it gets wild. My name is Elliot, and I'm 28 years old. By society's standards, I should have my life together by now. Married, maybe with kids, climbing some corporate ladder somewhere. Instead, I design infographics for small businesses out of my cramped apartment. It pays the bills, though barely enough to cover rent and the occasional pizza delivery. My dad doesn't approve, obviously. To him, being an artist means not having a real job. And honestly, that stings more than I care to admit. Then there's Clara, my little sister. She's everything I'm not. Charismatic, confident, and effortlessly beautiful. Growing up, she was the golden child, the one everyone loved. Teachers adored her, friends flocked to her, and our parents practically worshipped the ground she walked on. Don't get me wrong, I love her, but sometimes it feels like she stole all the oxygen in the room before I even had a chance to breathe. And then there's Dad, or as I call him in my head, the General. He runs our household like a military operation, barking orders and expecting perfection. Mom tries her best to keep the peace, but even she knows better than to argue when he sets his mind to something. Like, for example, forcing me to attend Clara's wedding despite my protests. So why am I telling you all this? Because what happened next wasn't just unexpected. It was downright explosive. You think you know where this is going, but trust me, you don't. Stick around, and let me take you through the messiest, most unforgettable weekend of my life. The invitation arrived 3 months ago, printed on thick cream paper with gold lettering that screamed, "This is fancy." Clara's name was embossed elegantly across the top, followed by Henry Whitmore's. They were tying the knot at Whispering Pines Manor, a venue so bougie it probably charged extra for air conditioning. I tossed it onto my coffee table without a second thought. Weddings weren't really my scene, and besides, Clara hadn't asked me personally anyway. Clearly, she didn't need me there. But then came the talk, or rather, the ultimatum. Dad sat me down in his study, which smelled faintly of leather and disappointment, and laid it out plain and simple. "You're going to that wedding, Elliot. No excuses." I tried reasoning with him. "Dad, come on. You know I hate these things. I'll stick out like a sore thumb." "Your family," he snapped, slamming his fist on the desk. "Family shows up. Unless you want me to cut you off completely?" Cutting me off wouldn't exactly break the bank. I wasn't exactly living large, but it would mean losing the health insurance he still paid for. Reluctantly, I agreed. What else could I do? Fast forward to the rehearsal dinner, and I already regretted it. Everyone looked perfect except me. Clara floated around in a sleek navy dress, laughing and chatting with guests like she'd been born to host events. Henry, her fiancé, seemed nice enough, though his overly polished smile made me uneasy. Then there was Dad, holding court at the head table, making sure everyone knew who was in charge. As I sipped my third glass of wine, trying to blend into the wallpaper, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Clara kept glancing at her phone, her fingers tapping nervously against the stem of her champagne flute. Something wasn't right, but I didn't know what. And frankly, I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. It wasn't hard to spot the tension between Clara and Henry during the rehearsal dinner. At first glance, they looked like the picture-perfect couple. Matching smiles, coordinated outfits, the whole 9 yards. But if you watched closely, really watched, you'd notice the cracks. Like when Henry leaned in to whisper something in her ear, and instead of smiling back, Clara stiffened, her knuckles turning white as she gripped her napkin. I excused myself early, claiming I needed fresh air. Truthfully, I just wanted to escape the suffocating weight of forced small talk. Outside, the evening breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere inside. As I wandered toward the edge of the property, I stumbled upon a gazebo tucked away behind a cluster of trees. Inside, I found an open box filled with papers, letters actually. Curiosity got the better of me, and I picked one up. The handwriting was messy yet familiar. Addressed to Clara, signed by someone named Aiden. My stomach churned as I skimmed the contents. They were love letters, passionate and raw, filled with promises of forever. Whoever Aiden was, he clearly meant a lot to Clara. And judging by the dates, their relationship had ended only months before she started dating Henry. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Clara's nervousness, her distant demeanor, the rushed engagement timeline. It all made sense. She wasn't marrying Henry because she loved him. She was doing it because Dad expected her to. The realization hit me like a freight train. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely sorry for my sister. Back inside, I avoided Clara's gaze as I returned to my seat. How could I look at her the same way knowing what I did? Every laugh she shared with Henry felt hollow, every smile strained. Yet no one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they chose not to see. Later that night, Dad cornered me in the hallway. His face was red, veins popping along his temples as he jabbed a finger in my direction. Elliot, listen carefully. Tomorrow you're giving a speech at the reception. Make it good. This is your chance to prove you're still part of this family. A speech, I repeated, incredulous. Why me? Clara has other friends, other family members who actually know her. Because I said so, he growled. You've spent years avoiding us, ignoring your responsibilities. Well, guess what? You can't run away from this. If you screw this up, don't bother coming home. His words hung heavy in the air, leaving me speechless. Responsibility? Was that what he called forcing me into a role I didn't ask for? Still, arguing was pointless. When Dad made up his mind, nothing short of an act of God could change it. So I nodded stiffly and retreated to my room, dread pooling in my chest. What was I supposed to say in this speech? Congratulate Clara on her fairy tale wedding while ignoring the elephant in the room? Or should I confront the truth head-on, risking destruction in the process? Either way, tomorrow promised to be anything but ordinary. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events in my mind. Eventually, I gave up and grabbed my laptop, determined to distract myself with work. But inspiration refused to strike. Instead, my thoughts kept drifting back to those letters, to Clara's haunted expression earlier. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Peeking outside, I saw Clara tiptoeing toward the kitchen. Her eyes widened when she spotted me leaning against the doorframe. "Elliot?" she whispered. "What are you doing up?" "I could ask you the same thing," I replied softly. "Can't sleep." She hesitated, then nodded. "Mind if I join you?" We settled onto the couch, the silence stretching between us until finally, she spoke. "Do you ever feel like you're stuck playing a role you didn't audition for?" Her question caught me off guard. "Yeah, actually. All the time." Clara sighed, twisting a strand of hair around her finger. "I used to think getting married would fix everything, that it would make Dad proud, make people stop asking questions about my future. But now," she trailed off, tears welling in her eyes, "now I'm not so sure." For once, I didn't have a witty comeback or sarcastic remark. All I could do was sit there, watching my sister unravel piece by piece. And in that moment, I realized I had a choice to make. Stay silent and let her walk down the aisle tomorrow, or speak up and risk tearing our family apart. The hours leading up to the wedding felt like a ticking time bomb. I couldn't shake the weight of Clara's confession from the night before, or the guilt gnawing at me for knowing what I now knew. As dawn broke, pale light seeped through the curtains of my childhood bedroom, casting long shadows across the walls. Sleep had been impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of Clara's face, torn between duty and desire. By 7 a.m., the house buzzed with activity. Caterers arrived, unloading crates of champagne and towers of pastries. Florists arranged bouquets so fragrant they made my nose itch. Mom flitted around in her bathrobe, clutching a clipboard as she double-checked last-minute details. Meanwhile, Dad barked orders into his phone, looking more like a drill sergeant than a proud father of the bride. Clara emerged just after breakfast, already dressed in her robe, hair half-curled. She gave me a weak smile when our paths crossed in the hallway. "Hey," she said softly. "Thanks for listening last night." "Anytime," I replied, though my voice cracked on the word. What was I supposed to say? That I'd spent the entire night drafting speeches in my head, each one worse than the last? That I was terrified of ruining her big day, or saving it? As the morning wore on, Clara disappeared into the bridal suite with her bridesmaids, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I wandered outside, seeking solace in the crisp spring air. The garden where the ceremony would take place glittered under the sunlight, chairs neatly arranged in rows, petals scattered along the aisle. It should have been beautiful, but all I could think about was how wrong this felt. I found myself pacing near the gazebo again, drawn to the box of letters almost against my will. This time, I didn't open them. I couldn't bear to read more, but their presence loomed over me like a ghost. Aiden. Who was he, really? And why hadn't Clara fought harder to keep him in her life? By noon, I realized I couldn't stall any longer. The speech, or whatever version of it I ended up giving, needed to be written. So I retreated to my room, pen in hand, and stared at the blank page. What do you say when everything is falling apart? The morning of the wedding passed in a blur of nervous energy and forced smiles. Breakfast was a tense affair, with Dad making passive-aggressive comments about punctuality and Mom trying, and failing, to lighten the mood. Clara barely touched her food, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate with a fork. When someone asked if she was excited, she plastered on a grin and said, "Of course," but her hands trembled as she sipped her coffee. Around 11 a.m., the bridesmaids descended upon the house like a flock of brightly colored birds, chattering loudly about hair and makeup. Clara disappeared upstairs with them, leaving me alone with Dad in the living room. He flipped through a newspaper, muttering about traffic patterns and weather forecasts. Finally, he glanced up at me. "You ready for your speech?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I muttered, avoiding his gaze. He narrowed his eyes. "Don't screw this up, Elliot. You hear me?" "Oh, believe me, I heard you loud and clear." His jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Mom called us both to help carry boxes out to the cars. For the next hour, we were too busy loading dresses, shoes, and flower arrangements to talk. Still, I could feel Dad's glare burning into the back of my skull every time I turned away. By mid-afternoon, the venue was bustling with activity. Guests milled about, admiring the decorations and snapping photos. I spotted Henry standing near the altar, adjusting his tie. He looked nervous but happy, completely oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Part of me wanted to march over and tell him everything, to warn him that he was walking into a marriage built on lies. But another part, the cowardly part, kept me rooted in place. Instead, I slipped into a quiet corner and pulled out my notes. My original draft had been bland and impersonal, filled with platitudes about love and commitment. Now, staring at the words scrawled across the page, I wondered if I had the guts to rewrite it entirely. Could I expose the truth without destroying everyone involved? Just as I was debating whether to scrap my speech altogether, a commotion near the entrance caught my attention. Turning, I saw a man arguing with one of the ushers. He was tall, with dark hair and sharp features, dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket, a stark contrast to the sea of suits and gowns surrounding him. Something about him seemed familiar, though I couldn't quite place it. Then it clicked. Aiden. My heart skipped a beat. Was he here to crash the wedding? To win Clara back? Whatever his intentions, I needed answers. Excusing myself, I approached him cautiously. "Aiden," he turned, surprise flickering across his face. "Yeah, that's me. Do I know you?" "I'm Elliot," I said quickly. "Clara's brother." Recognition dawned, followed by anger. "Oh, right. The family who convinced her to throw her life away." His words stung, but I deserved them. "Look, I don't blame you for being upset, but can we talk? Somewhere private." After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. We stepped outside, away from prying eyes, and sat on a bench overlooking the garden. Up close, Aiden looked exhausted, bags under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. "Why are you here?" I asked finally. "To stop her," he admitted. "Clara doesn't love Henry. She never did. She only agreed to marry him because your dad pressured her into it." "I know," I said quietly. "I found your letters." Aiden's expression softened. "Then you understand why I can't let this happen. She deserves better." "So do I admitted. But exposing the truth might ruin everything. Not just the wedding, but our family too. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Aiden leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "Elliot, sometimes doing the right thing means risking everything. If you care about Clara, you'll find a way to stop this." His words echoed in my mind long after he left. Doing the right thing, risking everything. As guests began filing into their seats, I realized I didn't have much time to decide. Either I stayed silent and let Clara walk down that aisle, or I stood up and risked tearing my family, and hers, apart. Back inside, chaos reigned. Ushers guided guests to their seats while photographers snapped candid shots of people laughing and chatting. Clara, resplendent in her ivory gown, hovered near the entrance with her bridesmaids, fidgeting with her veil. From a distance, she looked every bit the radiant bride, but up close, I could see the fear lurking behind her smile. Mom intercepted me as I wandered aimlessly through the crowd. "Elliot, sweetheart, are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just thinking." She studied me for a moment, then lowered her voice. "Whatever you're planning to say during that speech, please be careful. Your father's temper isn't the only thing at stake here." Her words hit home. This wasn't just about me or Clara, it was about everyone. Mom, Dad, Henry, even Aiden. One wrong move and the fallout could destroy us all. Retreating to a quiet corner, I pulled out my notes once more. The original draft mocked me, its hollow phrases meaningless in the face of everything I now knew. Crumpling the paper, I started fresh, scribbling furiously as emotions poured onto the page. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking, but the words felt honest. For the first time, I had something worth saying. As the music began and guests rose to their feet, I tucked the speech into my pocket and took my place near the front. Clara appeared moments later, arm linked with Dad's, moving slowly down the aisle. Her eyes met mine briefly, questioning, searching. I gave her a small nod, hoping she understood what I was about to do. This was it. No turning back now. The ceremony unfolded in a haze of soft music and whispered blessings. Each step Clara took down the aisle felt heavier than the last, her satin train trailing behind her like a ghost of decisions past. As she reached the altar and stood beside Henry, I couldn't help but notice how stiffly she held herself. Like a porcelain doll on display, fragile and forced into perfection. Henry, oblivious to the tension radiating off her, beamed with pride as he slipped the ring onto her finger. The officiant's voice droned on about love and partnership, but his words seemed hollow against the backdrop of everything I knew. My stomach churned as I glanced at my notes one final time, tucked safely in my pocket. What was I doing? Was I really about to detonate this powder keg of secrets right here, in front of everyone? My gaze drifted toward Dad, seated proudly in the front row. His face was stern, expectant, the same look he'd given me when he demanded I give this speech. Beside him, Mom fidgeted with her handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously between Clara and me. She must have sensed something was off. Maybe she even guessed what I was planning. Either way, her unease only deepened my own. Then there was Clara. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, her eyes flicked briefly to mine. It wasn't a plea for silence, it was a dare, a challenge. "Do it," her expression seemed to say. "Say what you came here to say." But doubt crept in anyway. What if I was wrong? What if exposing the truth didn't free Clara but instead trapped her in guilt and regret? And what about Henry? Sure, he might not be the love of her life, but he seemed genuinely kind. Did he deserve to have his heart shattered in front of 100 strangers? As the officiant announced it was time for speeches, My legs felt like lead as I rose from my seat. Every instinct screamed at me to sit back down, to let the day play out as planned. But Clara's earlier words echoed in my mind. Do you ever feel like you're stuck playing a role you didn't audition for? I swallowed hard and stepped up to the microphone. There was no turning back now. The room fell silent as I approached the podium, all eyes fixed on me. Even the waitstaff paused mid-step, trays of champagne hovering in limbo. I adjusted the microphone, my hands trembling slightly, and cleared my throat. Hi, everyone. I began, my voice cracking under the weight of attention. For those who don't know me, I'm Elliot, Clara's older brother. A polite smattering of applause rippled through the crowd. Dad sat ramrod straight, arms crossed over his chest, his glare practically burning a hole through my forehead. Mom offered a weak smile, though her knuckles were white from gripping her handkerchief too tightly. Clara stood near the altar, her bouquet clasped so tightly her knuckles matched Mom's. I wasn't exactly thrilled about giving this speech, I admitted, earning a few chuckles from the audience. In fact, I almost skipped the wedding altogether. But then I realized something. Weddings aren't just about two people coming together. They're also about family and honesty. The room grew quieter, the mood shifting subtly. Guests exchanged curious glances, sensing that this wasn't going to be your typical best man spiel. Clara's grip on her bouquet loosened slightly, her eyes locking onto mine with a mixture of fear and hope. So today, I continued, my voice steadying, I want to talk about truth, about the things we hide, even from ourselves, because we think they'll make others happy, or because we're afraid of disappointing them. Behind me, I heard a chair scrape against the floor. Dad shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. I pressed on, ignoring the daggers he was shooting at me with his eyes. Clara, I said, turning to face her directly. You've always been the golden child. Everyone loves you. Your friends, your teachers, even our parents. Laughter rippled through the crowd, though it sounded nervous now, tinged with anticipation. Clara's cheeks flushed pink, but she didn't look away. But here's the thing, I continued, my voice dropping lower, more intimate. You didn't choose this path because it made you happy. You chose it because you thought it would make them happy. I gestured vaguely toward Dad, whose face had gone pale beneath his tan. And maybe that works for some people. Maybe they can live their lives pretending everything's fine. But not you, Clara. Her breath hitched audibly, and Henry turned to stare at her. Confusion etched across his features. Around us, whispers erupted like wildfire. Someone gasped. Another muttered, "Oh my God! I found letters." I confessed, my voice trembling now. Letters from someone named Aiden. Someone you loved deeply before all this happened. Someone you gave up because... I hesitated, glancing at Dad. Because you were told it was the right thing to do. The room exploded into murmurs. Clara's bridesmaids exchanged horrified looks, while Henry looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Clara herself stood frozen, tears streaming silently down her face. Dad bolted upright, his chair clattering to the floor. "Elliot!" he barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. Enough! But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Before Dad could storm the stage, Clara moved. She set her bouquet down gently on the altar and stepped forward, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Her voice, when she spoke, was barely above a whisper, but it carried enough force to silence the room once more. "It's true," she said, taking the microphone from me. Tears streaked her makeup, but she didn't seem to care. "Everything Elliot said is true." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Clara turned to Henry, her hands shaking as she reached for his. "Henry, you're an amazing man. Kind, generous, supportive. But I can't marry you, not like this. Not when my heart belongs to someone else." Henry stared at her, stunned. For a moment, I thought he might argue or beg her to reconsider. Instead, he nodded slowly, his expression softening. "Clara," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "if you're not happy, then neither am I. I want you to be with whoever makes you whole." Her shoulders sagged with relief, and she hugged him tightly before stepping back. Turning to the audience, she added, "I'm sorry for lying. To all of you, to myself. I thought I could pretend that I could trade happiness for approval. But I can't. Not anymore." The room erupted into murmurs again, but this time, they weren't judgmental. People nodded sympathetically, some even wiping away tears. Clara's vulnerability resonated deeply, breaking down walls we hadn't even realized existed. Henry's reaction was the most surprising part of all. After Clara's admission, he didn't storm off or demand explanations. Instead, he pulled her aside, speaking softly so only she, and those closest to them, could hear. "I suspected something was wrong," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But I convinced myself it was nerves, jitters. I didn't want to push you." Clara shook her head, guilt written all over her face. "You deserve better than this, Henry. Better than me." "No," he countered firmly. "What you deserve is honesty. From yourself, from everyone. If calling off the wedding helps you find that, then I support you. Completely." Their exchange silenced the remaining skeptics in the room. Even Dad, who had been pacing furiously near the back, stopped mid-stride, momentarily stunned by Henry's grace. For a brief moment, I wondered if maybe Henry wasn't such a bad guy after all. Maybe he understood love better than any of us. When Clara returned to the altar, holding Henry's hand briefly in gratitude, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. The tension dissolved, replaced by a strange sense of solidarity. We were witnessing something raw and real, a reckoning that none of us had anticipated. Of course, Dad wasn't having any of it. As soon as Clara finished speaking, he marched toward the stage, his face contorted with fury. "Elliot!" he roared, pointing a finger at me like a weapon. "How dare you embarrass this family like this? Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stood my ground, meeting his glare head-on. "I did what needed to be done, Dad. You wanted honesty? Well, here it is. This isn't just Clara's story. It's ours. Yours, mine, Mom's. We've spent years pretending everything's fine while quietly falling apart. Enough is enough." His fists clenched at his sides, veins bulging along his neck. "You selfish brat. Always thinking about yourself, never considering the consequences. For once, maybe that's okay." I shot back, my voice rising. "Maybe it's time we stopped sacrificing our happiness for appearances. Look around, Dad. This isn't a failure. It's a chance to start over, to fix what's broken." Mom intervened then, placing a gentle hand on Dad's arm. "Richard, please, let's listen to them, to each other." He shrugged her off, but the fire in his eyes dimmed slightly. For the first time in years, I saw cracks in his armor, signs that maybe, just maybe, he was listening. The room was eerily quiet after Dad's outburst, the kind of silence that hums with unspoken tension. Clara and I stood side by side at the front of the venue, united in a way we hadn't been since childhood. For years, our relationship had been strained. Her chasing perfection, me retreating into solitude. But now, as the weight of truth settled over us, it felt like the walls between us were crumbling. Clara turned to me, her eyes shimmering with tears. "Elliot," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to say. Thank you for standing up for me, even when I couldn't stand up for myself." "You don't have to thank me," I replied softly, my own throat tight with emotion. "You're my sister. That's what I'm here for." She hugged me then, clinging to me like she used to when we were kids and the world seemed too big to face alone. In that moment, I realized how much I'd missed her. Not the polished, perfect version everyone saw, but the real Clara, the one who doubted herself and feared failure just like the rest of us. As we pulled apart, she gave me a watery smile. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure. "Yeah, one step at a time." Behind us, the guests began to murmur again, some rising from their seats to offer words of support or comfort. It was surreal, watching strangers rally around us after such a public unraveling. But amidst the chaos, there was a sense of catharsis, a shared understanding that sometimes breaking down is the first step toward healing. Henry approached cautiously, his expression a mix of sadness and admiration. "Clara," he said gently, "if there's anything I can do, anything at all." She shook her head, smiling faintly. "You've already done enough, Henry. Thank you for being so understanding." He nodded, then stepped back, giving her space. As he rejoined his family, I noticed several people patting him on the shoulder, offering condolences. Despite everything, he handled the situation with grace, and I couldn't help but respect him for it. Meanwhile, Mom had managed to coax Dad into sitting down again, though his jaw remained clenched and his gaze fixed firmly on the floor. The anger in his eyes had faded slightly, replaced by something else. Regret, perhaps, or shame. Whatever it was, it signaled a shift, however small, in the dynamics of our fractured family. By the time the ceremony officially ended, or rather, dissolved into an awkward semi-reception, the venue was nearly empty. Most guests had filtered out quietly, murmuring apologies or well wishes as they left. Those who stayed behind helped pack up decorations and leftover food, their movements subdued compared to the earlier flurry of activity. Clara disappeared upstairs with Mom to change out of her wedding gown, while Dad retreated to the parking lot, presumably to cool off. Left to my own devices, I wandered outside, seeking solace in the fresh air. The garden, once adorned with flowers and ribbons, now looked abandoned, petals scattered across the grass like confetti from a forgotten celebration. I found Clara sitting on a bench near the gazebo, her dress swapped for jeans and a sweater. She looked smaller somehow, less burdened yet still fragile. Sitting beside her, I didn't say anything at first. Words felt unnecessary. We both knew this was just the beginning of a long road ahead. Finally, she spoke. "What happens now?" "I guess we figure it out," I said with a shrug. "Together." She nodded, leaning her head against my shoulder. "Promise me something, Elliot. Anything. No more secrets. No more pretending. From now on, we tell each other the truth, even if it hurts." It was a promise I intended to keep. Deal. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the sky, Mom joined us outside. She carried a tray of tea and sandwiches, setting it down on the table between us before taking a seat. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured 3 cups, her usual calm demeanor tinged with exhaustion. "I need to say something," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "To both of you." Clara and I exchanged glances but remained silent, letting her gather her thoughts. "For years, I've watched your father push you too, to excel, to conform, to meet expectations that weren't yours to begin with. And I let him. I stayed quiet because—" She hesitated, tears pooling in her eyes. "Because I was afraid. Afraid of conflict. Afraid of losing him. Afraid of failing as a mother." Her admission hung heavy in the air, raw and unexpected. Clara reached over, squeezing her hand. "Mom, you didn't fail us. I should have spoken up sooner," Mom continued, her voice steadying. "When I saw how unhappy you were, Clara, when I heard Richard yelling at you, Elliot, I should have done something. Anything. It's not too late," I said firmly. "We can fix this together." She smiled faintly, nodding. "You're right. Starting today, things will change. Your father may not see it yet, but he needs to understand that love isn't about control. It's about trust, about listening." For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a glimmer of hope, not just for Clara and me, but for our entire family. The days following the aborted wedding were tense but transformative. Dad avoided us initially, holing up in his study and refusing to discuss what had happened. But eventually, under Mom's persistent urging and possibly his own guilt, he agreed to sit down with Clara and me for a family meeting. It wasn't easy. Emotions ran high, old wounds reopened, and accusations flew. Yet through it all, we kept talking. Slowly, painfully, we began to peel back the layers of resentment and misunderstanding that had built up over the years. Dad admitted he'd been too harsh, too focused on appearances. "I thought I was protecting you," he confessed, his voice choked with emotion. "But instead, I pushed you away." Clara forgave him, though forgiveness didn't come easily. "I get it, Dad," she said softly. "But next time, listen to me. Don't assume you know what's best." As for me, I confronted him about his dismissive attitude toward my career. "Art matters, Dad. It's how I express myself, how I connect with the world. If you can't respect that, then maybe we'll never fully understand each other." To his credit, he listened. Not perfectly, not without resistance, but enough to show he was trying. It wasn't a magical fix. It would take months, maybe years, to truly heal, but it was a start. 1 year later, life looked vastly different for all of us. Clara reconnected with Aiden, and though their relationship took time to rebuild, they eventually grew stronger than ever. They moved in together, choosing simplicity over extravagance, and started planning a future on their own terms. As for me, I published a book inspired by the events of that chaotic weekend. Titled The Speech That Changed Everything, it became an unexpected bestseller, resonating with readers who had faced similar struggles within their families. Writing it forced me to confront my own fears and insecurities, but it also reminded me of the power of vulnerability and honesty. Dad began seeing a therapist, learning to manage his temper and communicate openly. He even attended one of my book signings, standing awkwardly in the corner until I invited him on stage to share a few words. Watching him fumble through a heartfelt apology to the audience was one of the proudest moments of my life. Mom blossomed in ways none of us anticipated, rediscovering passions she'd set aside decades ago. She started painting again, filling our home with vibrant colors and laughter. And Henry? Well, he found someone new, a woman who appreciated his kindness and shared his dreams. When Clara bumped into him at a coffee shop months later, they hugged like old friends, grateful for the closure they'd achieved. On the anniversary of the infamous wedding that wasn't, Clara and I returned to Whispering Pines Manor. The venue looked different now, stripped of its former grandeur and rented out for corporate events. Still, walking through the gardens brought back memories, some painful, others hopeful. We sat on the same bench where we'd promised no more secrets, sipping coffee as the morning sun warmed our faces. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't said anything?" Clara asked suddenly. "All the time," I admitted. "But I think we needed that day. Needed to break everything apart to put it back together properly." She smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. "You're a good brother, Elliot. Better than I deserve." "Nah," I teased, nudging her playfully. "You're stuck with me, sis." Fast forward another year, and Clara and Aiden tied the knot in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. This time, the atmosphere was genuine, filled with laughter and tears of joy rather than tension and regret. Dad walked Clara down the aisle, his arm linked with hers, pride evident in every step. During the reception, I gave a speech, this one far less explosive than the last. "Love isn't perfect," I told the crowd. "It's messy and complicated and sometimes downright terrifying. But it's worth fighting for, worth being honest about. So here's to Clara and Aiden and to second chances, for them and for all of us." The applause was thunderous, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Just as I thought life couldn't surprise me anymore, Clara dropped a bombshell during a quiet dinner a few weeks later. "Guess what?" she said, grinning ear to ear. "What?" I asked warily. "Aiden proposed," she squealed, holding out her hand to reveal a modest yet stunning ring. "And get this, he wants to turn the story of our journey into a screenplay." I burst out laughing. "Of course he does. Because why stop at ruining one wedding when you can ruin Hollywood next?" Despite my teasing, I couldn't deny how happy she looked. Sometimes life throws curveballs, not all of them bad. Months later, I found myself sitting on a park bench with Clara, watching children chase each other across the grass. The screenplay idea had fizzled out, thankfully, but Clara and Aiden remained blissfully happy. Our family, though far from perfect, was finally finding its rhythm. "You know," Clara mused, "I used to think happiness meant having everything figured out, but now I realize it's about embracing the messiness, learning from it." I nodded, smiling. "Yeah, turns out, Life's better when you stop running from the hard stuff. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. For my sister, for my family, for the lessons we'd learned along the way. Life may not always go according to plan, but sometimes that's exactly what makes it beautiful.